I met Lou through Janet Bird. Janet Bird is one of the past organizers. Janet, are you still here? Hi, Janet. And Margaret Highland, are you still here? Margaret, if you didn't see Margaret, she was the original organizer for, yes, hi Margaret. She started this in 2009. Lou has been a great supporter of ours. This flag and a Tea Party flag that we have matching it came from Lou. He was very generous in helping us put on this. If we had more business support like we get from Lou at Summit Manufacturing in Hillsboro, there's no telling what we could do in advertising, in bringing people together like this, in motivating people. And so Lou, before any more people skedaddle out the door, Lou Barnes from Summit Manufacturing and a Marine Corvette. Lou.
Well, first, for all of you that stayed for this painful portion of the agenda this evening, thanks for coming this evening, and I hope that you're able to take away from this event something that you can help forward our conservative values in your neighborhoods and your communities. So to that, I really appreciate you guys coming. Second, I'd like to thank Charles Hammerly and the Northwest Tea Party Association, Karen Custer, and the North Coast Republican Women's Association, as well as Bob Shorten and the Placer County GOP. All the people that helped put this event on, thank you as well. It occurred to me the other day that an anniversary is fast approaching. On April 15th, 2009, the first Tea Party rally was held on the courthouse steps over here in Astoria. The Tea Party was the vision, previously mentioned, of Margaret Highland. She teamed up with Chris Bridgens to recruit patriots and hold rallies and other events until the baton was passed to Janet Bird. These three ladies are ardent patriots who have worked tirelessly for the cause. Now, would you three ladies please stand up and be recognized? I have something that wasn't a part of this, but I'm going to have to recognize a person anonymously this evening. In the last week, there's one of the people in this audience here stepped out of their proverbial comfort zone and went to address a wrong. A lot of folks wouldn't have done this. A lot of folks would have hoped somebody else would have done this. They would have hoped that, let's just let it pass. But this particular individual stepped out, and I want to tell you from the bottom of my heart that I respect deeply what you did, and I salute you. That person does know who they are, and there's probably 2 or 3 other people. But with that, I trust that your thoughts are with them. Well, this evening, I think a 3 weeks ago, Charles asked me if I could say a few words on the theme this evening, sharing a positive vision of economic opportunity. After I sat down to put word to paper, I felt that I probably had overstepped my bounds. One of the first questions that came to mind was, why has the economic recovery been so anemic and protracted? You know, we have a 12 to 15% jobless rate. I think in 2013 the GDP was like 1.9%. Not a very uplifting thought for this event this evening. What I would like to do, however, is share with you my vision for economic opportunity, albeit it's a bit unconventional, as how to increase the opportunity for everyone, not only in our region here, but throughout the United States. So, if you would bear with me, let me set the stage for this discussion. For a free market society, we need a couple of things. We need a very limited government. We want one that would provide for a common defense, one that has a basic set of laws that we all abide by. We need educational institutions, grade schools, high schools, middle schools, institutions of higher learning to educate our people. We need businesses. We need public works departments that build our roads, our bridges, our ports of entry, and maintain the same. Obviously, there are many more, but I think these are the major ones. When one explores each of these institutions, one rises slightly above the rest as to its order of importance. In my view, at least, I think that would be businesses. Let me make a comparison to the human body. There is one organ that, if it doesn't function properly or ceases to function, we don't exist, and that's the heart. We can live without a kidney, we can live without part of a liver, we can live without a lung. A person could be even brain dead and survive, and I'm not referring to progressives here. But when the heart ceases to function, we're out of here. We can survive, but when the heart stops beating, we're history. In our free market society, without businesses, there would be no jobs, resulting in no way to pay for all of these other components that I previously mentioned in our free market. I had a little trouble with this a couple of years ago, and there were probably some of you folks in this room that was at a political forum in Astoria, and I made this same point. When I left that forum, though, there was a school teacher in Astoria that approached me, and she took exception with my concept. And I said, well, what's yours? She said, well, I think the educational institution is probably a little bit more important than all of the rest. I thought for a moment, I said, okay. I said, well, let me try something out here. I said, do you know who Bill Lear is? And she didn't know. I said, how about Benjamin Franklin? She said, of course, everybody knows who he is. I said, well, let me tell you a little bit about the first gentleman, Bill Lear. He had an idea once that he was going to create a corporate jet. There weren't any around at that moment in time. And he thought, this would be a great idea. Small aircraft, you could move your corporate officers around if they needed to get to point A to point B very quickly. They wouldn't have to wait in airports and all that sort of thing. He bounced that idea off a couple of friends, and they said, well, that'll never fly. No pun intended. But today it's a household name. When you look at a corporate jet, you look up there and you probably say Learjet. It might be a Cessna Citation or a Falcon, but that's his name. He also invented an 8-track tape. For some of these people in the audience probably remember that. Right, Charles? He also invented a transistor about that big. And he was able to then put that and reduce the size of the radio so that it would fit into an automobile. Now you might think, well, that's not that big a deal, but there was a physicist that said you could not make a resistor smaller than a foot by a foot by a foot. And when someone asked him, he said, how'd you do that? He said, well, I guess I never read his paper. And finally, one night when he was sitting in the bar having a couple drinks, he drew up the first autopilot system on the back of a napkin. So I set that aside for a minute. I could tell I was boring her. And I said, well, let's move over to Ben Franklin. I said, he obviously was a great statesman. He has hundreds of quotes that we use every day. He was a businessman. He owned a bunch of print shops up and down the eastern seaboard. He was an inventor. He came up with the eyeglasses. He fussed around with electricity for a while. And I said, but man, there's one thing both of these gentlemen had something in common. He said, well, what's that? I said, well, Bill Lear dropped out of the 8th grade. And Ben Franklin only had 2 years of formal education. So how could these people be so successful and made such an impact on our life without an education? Now, I'm not here to knock education. That wasn't the point of my discussion, because we obviously need it. But I don't think I really got through to her, so I kind of backed up a little bit and I said, tell me something. Who pays you? And she said, well, that's kind of a stupid question. The Astoria School District pays me. I said, okay. I said, but since the Astoria School District doesn't produce any goods or services to sell to somebody who collects the money to pay you, where do they get the money? I said, well, State of Oregon. Government of the State of Oregon. They're the ones that send the money down to the district that sends it to me. I said, okay, but I have the same point. The state of Oregon, the government, does not produce any good or service that somebody is willing to buy to get the money to send to the school district to write the check to you. I said, okay. I said, what's your point? I said, well, they got to get the money from somewhere. Where do they get it? He said, well, they get it from citizens. People pay taxes. I said, oh, we're getting close. I said, okay, the state of Oregon does in fact confiscate resources from its citizens and does send it to the school district that writes a check to you. Okay, now we're almost to the headwaters here, sweetheart, so bear with me. Where did they get the money to pay the taxes to the state, to the district, to you? I said, well, they have jobs. I said, there you have it. We're down to a business. That's why I have identified a business as slightly above the level of importance to these other components of our free market society. I'm not sure to this day if I really got through to her. I've got one more leg of this stool to put together, and I'll get to my vision. What does it take to enter the free market system as a participant? Because we've established a business may be slightly more important than the rest, so you have to have players, right? You have to have people out there that are bouncing around in that free market to make all of this happen. Well, way back when I was going to college, I think one of the first classes I may have taken was like Business 101, you know, something like that, Introduction to Business, whatever. And I remember the professor at one point said it takes the 3 M's to start a business. I said, oh, let me write this down. Money, material, and manpower. Now that's been expanded over the years, but back in my era, that's what it was. So I wrote that thing down and stuck it in my folder to material for future reference, and I just tucked it away. About 18 years later, I was sitting there one day and I thought, you know, why don't I start a business? I'm running 3 corporations right now for other people. The only thing I don't have is money. So let me pull that little folder out. So I sat there and I said, this will be a piece of cake. But the first thing that I found when I sat down was, I'm missing something. Anybody have an idea what I was missing? I got the 3 M's. Exactly. I thought, wow, now I got to come up with an idea. And then the frustrating part about that is that you look at it in the, sorry, Ron. That I had better come up with an idea that was better than the next guy's idea. Or I better come up with something so unique it isn't out there. So I was stumped a little bit, but I thought about it and I said, you know, I kind of kicked around in manufacturing, so I think I'll start a multifaceted manufacturing company that supplies production capabilities to OEMs, original equipment manufacturers. So I got all that dialed in, and I probably spent 6 months, you know, going through it, correcting my spelling error. And I finally said, I think I'm ready. So I called up Keith Swinson, corporate attorney, and I said, hey Keith, I need to come down, we need to fill out articles of incorporation and all that other garbage, and I'm going to pull the trigger on this. He said, well, come on down. So I got done, piece of cake, you know, half hour later, I'm walking out of that place, and I thought, this is wonderful. This is not even all that difficult. I get in my car, and I start driving away, and I had a flashback. About 18 years prior, I was in the Marine Corps at the time, and I went into my NCOIC, Gunnery Sergeant Harmon, and I said, hey Gunny, I think I want to jump out of a plane. Now this Gunnery Sergeant Harmon was a force recon guy, and he's jumped out over 1,000 times at that. And he looked at me and said, Sergeant, why in the world would you want to jump out of a perfectly good aircraft? He said, it's not worth it. So I said, no, I want to do it. He gave me permission, so I went to the schools, I went to the classes, I did all that sort of thing, figured out how to pack and shoot, and, you know, the static lines, and, you know, the reserve shoot. I had it all dialed in. And it was just as easy as when I had done that business plan. But then the moment of truth came, when you're up there in that C-119, circling around Whidbey Island. They lower that ramp, and you have to walk up to it. And then you take a peek down, 3,000 feet down, and in about 1/10 of a second, about 100 things ran through my mind of what is going to go wrong as soon as I take that step. Pull back now to when I'm driving in that car. I had the same exact feeling. Fear. Gut check time. What did you miss in this business plan? What's going to go wrong? You can go bankrupt. I had a good job. I made a good salary. My family was doing okay. So then, once I got home, I had to sit down and say, you know what actually takes? 5 things. You got the 3 M's, you have to have an idea, and you better overcome the fear. But most importantly, one needs the drive and the intestinal fortitude to see that thing through. Some months after I started Summit Manufacturing, an old Marine Corps adage came to mind. When your patrol is going good, you're about to get ambushed. And boy, did I. I tell you, it was firefight after firefight after firefight. I had visions of bankruptcy. I was pushed to the literal brink. I could see, I'm out of a job now, I'm going to be out of a job. I don't have a roof to put over my kids' heads, no food on the table. Kept me awake night after night after night. But God willing, and somehow I overcame the adversity and was able to advance. My story, though, is not that unfamiliar to any other entrepreneur that's ever wandered out there. I'm sure they've had almost the same experience that I did. So considering all the risk and uncertainty, why would somebody venture out onto that playing field? The answer to this question lies in the founding principles put forth by our framers, that being life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, an emphasis on the last one. They knew that, without the opportunity to enjoy the fruits of one's labor, I doubt that anyone would venture out there. They knew that when people are free to pursue their own self-interests, that in doing so, society as a whole would prosper as well. They knew that the economic pie was not finite, that it was able to grow as more and more people interacted economically in a free society unencumbered by bureaucrats and over-regulation and taxation. The pie, if it were, was not 9 inches. It could grow to 10, it could grow to 11, it could grow to 14 and beyond. So that brings me to my vision for economic opportunity. Our nation has more natural resources and more hard-working people that love their country and their liberty. I think probably more than anywhere else on this earth. All they, or we need, is to put back into play the rules outlined in the Constitution. The rest will take care of itself. We need to hire people, and by that I mean elect, who actually believe in their oath of office. And when they breach that oath of office, we get rid of them in a heartbeat. And I'm not talking about waiting for the next election. When they tell that fib, we kick them out. Again, the opportunities are out there, they're everywhere. We just need to cast off the chains that have gradually restricted our ability to take advantage of them. Ronald Reagan captured this thought best, and I quote, "We who live in free market societies believe that growth, prosperity, ultimately human fulfillment are created from the bottom up, not the government down. Only when human spirit is allowed to invent and create, only when individuals are given a personal stake in deciding economic policies and benefiting from their successes, only then can societies remain economically alive, dynamic, and free." So what I ask is that in your day-to-day lives, as you come in contact with folks that don't necessarily share our conservative values, that you communicate to them that we are all in this boat called America. And when this boat sinks, we all go down together. I would be remiss if I didn't mention the 33 brothers that died in Vietnam, as well as the hundreds of thousands of other patriots that did so as well for what we have here today. I challenge each and every one of you to ensure that when you leave this earth, that you leave this country in better shape for those that follow. Thanks for listening, and God bless you all. One thing, all the folks here tonight wanted to make sure, there you go, that you have something to put on your automobiles as you're driving down to Florida.
Thank you. All right, people, thank you very much for your patience. I've got a list here of the winners for our drawings.